Let's start the stream to YouTube. And we are live on YouTube. Have fun.
All right. Welcome, everyone, to another episode of BizzTalk Africa, Bureau Veritas edition. Really excited today. I actually have both Mark and Sal from Bureau Veritas. Hi, Mark. Hi, Sal. Good to see you both. Mark's been on a few times.
Hi,
but
Biddy.
this is Sal's
Hi.
first time, so really glad to have Sal here today. And as always, my wonderful co-host, Vidya. How are you, Vidya?
Wonderful on site.
Wonderful. And I'm Jason Schuster, our host and VP of Business Development here at BizzTech. And today we are talking about shaping a world of trust, safe to eat. Now, before we get started, Mark, I know you've been on a few times. Bureau Veritas is a regular guest, but could you take a few minutes, tell us about Bureau Veritas, and then we'll dive into everything.
Thanks, Jason. Thanks, Vidya. Happy to be back with all of you. Today, I'm calling you and joining you from South Africa. So I'm right in the middle of the action, which is good. Bureau Veritas is a world leader in testing, inspection, and certification services. And since its inception in 1828, we have looked to shape a better world, better environment, and better business practices. Which brings me to why I wanted to have today a healthy dialogue around food safety and why it is important from farm to fork that safety all along the food chain is monitored. I don't know if you, I don't know if you know, but roughly speaking, it's just statistic is always rough figures. It's not precise figures, but the WHO, they estimate that more than 90 million people in Africa are estimated to fall ill from foodborne illnesses. And at least 130,000 people die each year as a result of that. But the most severely affected, of course, is either the children or the elderly people. And this is why it's a very hot topic. And here I would like to share with you one thing I do believe in is food safety is not that obvious. If I'm standing at the top of the edge of a cliff, my body gonna tell me it's dangerous. Don't move forward. You have to go a bit backwards. There's a huge danger there. If I eat something where the pesticide residue or the chemicals or heavy metals are not dangerous for my body, I'm gonna eat. My body gonna send no alarm, not at all.
Right.
And here it's a bit a huge difference versus a lot of topics you may heard about safety. And that's what I think is one of the reasons. On June 7th, the world will celebrate the World Food Safety Day. And the theme is Safe Food Today for a Healthy Tomorrow. And this theme stresses that production and consumption of safe food has immediate and long-term benefits for people, for the economy and the planet. And hence, it seems the most appropriate time to discuss safe to eat. Is that safe to eat what we eat?
Absolutely. I almost feel like we should have had this on Monday, on the 7th. That would have been appropriate, but we usually do these on Friday, so I guess today we'll have to do. Those are some pretty harrowing statistics, Mark. Those are some really big numbers.
Yeah, really impressive. Even if it's rough estimate, but it's a very serious topic, that's for sure. There's no doubt about it. And I think everybody is now recognizing there's no doubt, and that's our topic we need to address.
Absolutely. Now, Sal, how does Bureau Veritas how does Bureau Veritas take care of that farm to fork cycle? Or I guess that maybe that's a better question for Mark. What does Bureau Veritas do about that?
I can give few hints. Bureau Veritas has expertise in all phases of the value chain. So we try to support and we support companies in their objective to ensure responsible and fair sourcing, and also to guarantee product traceability from point of origination through consumption. And that's especially pronounced through our food certification system. And also that is part of our Bureau Veritas Green Light services and solution. And our aim is to offer and to force people to get transparency and comfort on the authenticity. And to do that, what we provide testing, inspection, and certification services all along the supply chain. So I'm gonna give you a few examples from the beginning to the end. At the very beginning, we can provide some soil testing, soil analysis, fertilizer analysis, because fertilizer is gonna end up in your plate, in your food. So you need to be sure about what you're doing, or that may pollute also the environment. So you need to be a good control. Then we can inspect the product when it is like an apple, the raw material. And here we've got laboratory services, which are able to test the quality of the products. We are also checking the origin and the quantity, but we also have many laboratories able to test the food and all the vegetables, all the. Then all along the supply chain, we can provide solutions to control quality and safety. And here also with digital platform, which allow to control, as for example, the cold chain and the respect of the cold chain all along the supply chain, which is really critical for some products. Then we've got all the certification, food certification system, which is helping to define some requirements for food processors to make sure they follow those requirements to build effective food safety management system, which consequently help provide assurance to consumer that the products are safe to eat and of a high quality. And then we can ensure also, or we provide all the classical, I would say, building and facilities inspection, which are going all around where you are processing the food and the quality. So the purpose is really to be there from the very beginning up to the end, because you've got topics and point to check at every step of the supply chain. I
Absolutely.
hope I've been clear, Jason, or video.
No, it's okay. To our viewers, I know Vidya is traveling today, so her connection is a little unstable. She's fallen off the call for a minute, but I'm sure she'll be back. I have two questions. Well, kind of two parts. The first part, and this was a question from Vidya before she lost connection, and that was, how do you support small farmers? Now, this may not be the right time to address that. Maybe it's better for a little bit later. But there's something else that you talked about. You mentioned certification on food. Can you unpack that a little bit for our viewers?
Sure. So thank you, Jason. So really, food certification allows food companies, manufacturers, so everything from a food grower to a food processor to the retailer to restaurants, to adopt proper food certification, proper safety control measures that are both regulatory, but as well as what are my contractual obligations, right, to the end consumer, to my customer, to who I'm dealing with. So food certification is really, and I'm going to throw some acronyms at you, so you better dodge, okay? Really, we start off with global food safety initiatives, and the most common or the most well-known and renowned is FSSC 22000. And FSSC 22000 is really food safety system certification. So I'll just unpack that acronym for you. But really what it is, it's a very robust, internationally accepted certification scheme. And it's for all the food and the beverage manufacturing sector. And what it then does is it takes your normal ISO 22000 and 22003 and takes all the technical specifications, the sector prerequisite programs, and it intertwines and integrates it, and then gives you that a platform to ensure your organization has developed a wide and open consultation with a larger number of related organizations. So for a lot of the guys who have ISO 22000, your FSSC 22000 is actually your next step to upgrade to a GFSI. And GFSI, I'll unpack that for you, is Global Food Safety Initiatives. So your FSSC ties into your global food safety initiatives. We then have things like Global Gap, and you then spoke about what do you do for farmers, right? What do you do for the agricultural sector? And GAP stands for Good Agricultural Practices. And really then this certification allows the food growers to ensure good, compliant, safe agricultural practices in their organizations. You know, the big question for a lot of guys, and you mentioned small, is that if you're not a large company and you don't have that outlay to invest in, you know, accredited certification systems, what's then, you know, out there for me? And you do have the GFSI Global Markets, which is for smaller companies. It's non-accredited, but at the same token, it gives you as the end consumer, as well as the retailer, that assurance that, hey, these guys have gone through accepted practices. They have looked at food safety, control measures, and compliance. And so it gives you that peace of mind, right? So there are many certification related to food certification. And one that is really popular at the moment, and especially in Europe, is organic certification. So you pop organic certification, and really organic certification and what BV offers is in line with the European community or the European Union. So it uses the EC regulations and ensures, as Mark was mentioning, pesticide residues. So really it takes you from that farm to fork, okay? And it looks at every process and every step. Is it organic, and are you complying with organic certification? So food certification, Jason, really is there to ensure that there's compliance, that there's proper food safety measures and critical points that you monitor and you evaluate. If I've answered that succinctly for you.
No, that's good. That's good. Just out of curiosity, can you give me an example of a non-acceptable practice versus how to do it the right way? As I think a lot of our viewers are like, we're hearing like, oh, well, you know, following, you know, accepted practices and
yes.
and doing it the right way. Like, can you give us an example?
So I'm going to throw it back at you. Okay.
Okay.
You as an end consumer, what would you want? So I'm a food manufacturer. What would you want from me? You would want peace of mind when you are consuming that product, that I'm eating it, there's quality, there's a whole host of things that have gone into it to ensure safe consumption. Okay. Unacceptable practices would be where I was, as a food manufacturer, would be totally unethical, or maybe not unethical, but maybe negligent, or I didn't care about the quality and the safety processes. Right. And one thing we've learned from this pandemic, of everything from sanitizing regularly to ensuring you're wearing your mask, safety and compliance is so important. And so can you imagine how much more it would be in the consumption of that meal that you are having? So just if I can get you thinking about it, that's what unacceptable would be, right? Where you would not want to consume that product.
Absolutely. Absolutely. No, I appreciate that.
You would like to you wouldn't like to be poisoned when you think you are eating something healthy and you are paying for healthy things. But in fact, that you are eating some heavy metals or pesticide, or the labeling is not in line with what it is inside the box. That's all part of the requirements. If you got or you've got no labeling, so sometimes you want to know what is inside. How much sugar are you eating, as for example, or glucine, and all that is part of the and the process is make sure there's no there's a lot of hygiene rules to apply and all that. Very often as a consumer, as mentioned by Sad, very often as a consumer, it seems obvious to us that everything is fine, but it's not that obvious.
Absolutely. Absolutely. Now, you mentioned a couple of things in there. You mentioned both food safety and food security. What's the difference, and how are they intertwined? How do they work together?
Okay, so food safety really, as we have started to unpack it, is why it's so important that every critical point is monitored and we ensure compliance to safety regulations. Okay. In the event that any of your food safety measures had fallen by the wayside, okay, you had not taken cognizance of ensuring that your pathogens, your salmonella, your E. coli, or whatever strains that are contained within food products were tested. In the event all of that then became lax, you could fundamentally be sitting with an issue where you have a food security problem, right? Because you'd have poor quality. You would have, when you as a consumer are consuming that end product, you could have a fatality or you could be seriously ill. Ultimately, if you do not take care of food safety, right, your next consequence is, unfortunately, that particular food is no longer safe to eat, right? So you're then pulling out the consumption of those products out of the marketplace. And I want to give you a really good example right here in South Africa. 2017, 2018, and I'm not sure out in the US if you guys did read about it, but according to the World Health Organization, it was the largest Listeria outbreak. Wow. And the Listeria outbreak was in a processed food. This particular processed food or processed meat was a staple diet or a staple food group for many of, certain income groups in South Africa. What then happened with the outbreak is that all the shelves, you had to remove this product, okay? There was no consumption. You had to completely stop until the issue was addressed. So it pulled out a complete food group off the chain. What then happens to those guys where it is a staple diet? You suddenly, your food group, your main meal is now pulled out. It creates a food security issue. So when we say food safety is tantamount to food security, we mean if quality, safety, critical points are not adhered to, you ultimately could be wiping out food groups that many of your consumers need access to. Right. You could then consequently be causing an issue if that group is pulled out. Your consumer now needs to go to another meal or another food group. What then happens if prices hike on that? You're potentially looking at, right, increased hunger, that particular group of people not having access to their main meals. It really is, when we say food safety is tantamount to food security, I think we have to understand how potent that statement is.
Absolutely, absolutely. Now I'm going to throw kind of a curveball at you here, because everything that you're talking about is so important. It's so important. But I guess I would be looking for some clarity. How burdensome can all of these practices, all of these steps that we have to follow, how burdensome can that be for small farmers, especially in Africa, where maybe their resources are a little bit less? There's still a lot of farming economy in Africa, but it's mostly small farmers. So how do small farmers do all this? How do they check all the boxes?
So as I mentioned before, we all are responsible for food safety. Right. And sometimes there is that misconception that we have to put a price tag to food safety. Right. There's no way you can put a price tag to food safety. So for the smaller companies and for farmers who don't necessarily have those kind of funds to outlay, there are non-accredited programs that still ensure you can be safe, that still ensure you don't have to pay large amounts to get yourself FSSC accredited or Global GAP or organic certification, but you can still follow the process and the rules to ensure that you are safe. Right. And that's where your question about acceptable versus non-acceptable, because even though you might not be accredited, you can still follow a very acceptable process and a very acceptable flow in terms of looking at all your steps and ensuring it is safe.
Absolutely. Absolutely. Wonderful. Now, there's obviously there's a lot of moving parts in food safety. There's a lot of moving parts in getting food from farm to fork. Right? Mm-hmm. Where does the responsibility lie? Where does the majority of the responsibility lie?
The responsibility, Jason, is all across the food chain, all across the food supply chain. Everyone from the small farmer that you talk about, the farm grower, to food processors, to manufacturers, to the warehouse, to the distribution, to the retailer, to the restaurateur, to you as the end consumer. The responsibility lies with all of us. And that is why that burden then gets, it becomes less burdensome, because we all take a little bit of it and we all are responsible to ensure that. Right. So if all of us in this, and as well as food experts, really we need food experts to start becoming the catalyst for paradigm change around food safety and the importance of food safety. Because, very often we throw around words just to be cliche or it's buzz. But as I said to you, sometimes we need to understand the potency and the magnitude of it. So responsibility in a nutshell lies with all of us. And if we ensure safe practices are in place and we do adopt proper certification policies, we look, as Mark said, from farm to fork, then that responsibility really is shared and is not as burdensome or not as expensive, for one particular group of people.
Absolutely. Absolutely. Now, would you say that food safety, food security, is this a bigger problem in Africa than it is in other countries, or is it still kind of a global issue?
Did we lose Mark?
I think we did, and I have I have a question for Mark, but I'll hold off until he gets back. But maybe you can answer this one.
Yes, so I think food safety, no matter where you are, whether you deem yourself first world or you deem yourself an emerging economy, food safety is an issue everywhere, because you're always going to get somebody who thinks that if you put in food safety measures, it's going to be expensive. I need to up my profits on my EBITDA, my bottom line. Okay, so whether you're sitting in Europe or the US or in Africa or Asia, it doesn't matter. Food safety is an issue and should be an issue. It should be a global issue. And that is why you have global certifications or global practices, right, that are important to comply to, because you want access to all markets. And really, if you do not ensure compliance and safety, how do you then get access to global markets? So food safety really is a global issue, and it should remain a global issue and should be that kind of discourse that we have.
Absolutely. Now, how far are we away from where we need to be as far as awareness and action, right? So this is obviously, it is a huge issue, but it's only an issue that's really become a part of the headlines more recently. How far are we from real adoption, real action here?
So in terms of food safety and real adoption and real action, it's like you as an individual having every day is a learning curve, right? You never quite reach that maturity that you want to be at. So yes, we should aspire for that, but I think where food safety is concerned, we should see ourselves as every day having to grow and every day having to learn and every day having to ensure adoption to regulatory and mandatory measures, but also looking at where it's not regulatory or mandatory to ensure we have a moral obligation. And I think it's that moral obligation that we need to juggle with and we need to embrace, and we need to say, therein lies our answer of how we migrate to that maturity that we want to get to, right?
Absolutely. Absolutely. Welcome back, Mark. Glad
I'm very sorry, I've been disconnected. I lost the line, so I lost the discussion. I'm very sorry.
It's all right. It's all right. It's just one of the byproducts of doing this globally like we are. So, okay, very, very good. Appreciate all of those responses, Sal. Very, very helpful. So, just kind of moving into our last topic, and we still have about 5 or 6 minutes here, and this one's really more for Mark. Mark, what do we do differently in the future to prevent Africa from becoming, I guess, like a dumping ground of substandard products, specifically food? I mean, just how do we address some of those statistics that you brought up earlier?
Yeah, thanks, Jason. And as you mentioned, from an ethical and technical perspective, I do believe there's an urgent need for definitely legislation, regulation, and of course, monitoring of food and pesticide standards as a major component in ensuring food safety on the continent. But here, what you can see across Africa, the creation and monitoring of standards has been implemented irregularly across Africa. Not everybody is doing the same.
Right.
And clearly, the African Food Safety Network, which is made of most of the African countries, says organized national food control system that guarantee food safety and quality, that effectively inform policy and better agricultural practices are needed everywhere in the continent. One thing I noted, nevertheless, which is good as well, is in many countries, you can see more and more the creation of food and drugs agency, which are, and the aim of those new agency is really dedicated to food safety, which is a good sign. And I think it's very likely under some African Union guideline, which is good. But then definitely many parts of Africa are still kind of a dumping ground for substandard foods. It's kind of obvious. And I do believe that only legislation will change that. As mentioned by Sal, I agree with her, it's a kind of a moral things, you need to do it because that's the right way to do it. But unfortunately, the world is the way it is. Without appropriate legislation, it will not change like that. And it's not specific to Africa, it's everywhere the same. So some countries are already, many countries in Africa are still relying a lot on imports. And some of them have already adopted some strict regulation, and they are ensuring the control of the goods which are imported. And especially, and Bureau Veritas is doing that in many countries through what we call the verification of conformity. And here we're going to check the quality of many products imported and the compliance with the food standards of those countries. But despite that, you still have some countries which are entering the countries here and there without crossing officially the border, I would say. So those ones enter the countries without being checked, which is still an issue. So the control of the border is definitely also an issue. But then you also have the national market. And here it's also to have the legislation and also the way to enforce the legislation. Here, what we need to do at Africa level also is to have also more laboratories available. So as Bureau Veritas, we are building up in partnership and with the support of Afreximbank. And I would like to thank Afreximbank for their initiative. We are building what they are building, and we're going to operate and run completely, and they are building under our design a big agri-food lab in Nigeria, which is typically a country which there's a lack of testing capabilities. Because if you want to enforce the legislation, the regulation, you also need to have the technical tool to do it. And it's also a good tool to train people, to explain what is at stake. So we are doing that in Nigeria, and we will continue to do it. We have a big one. South Africa is quite in advance. And if you look to the number of food, agri-food laboratories, South Africa is undoubtedly far more advanced than most of the countries in Africa. But we are doing that in Kenya, and we are also working with Afreximbank on some other project like that. But definitely regulation and enforcement of the regulation gonna be it's one of the key ones. And today, what I would like is at least all the people, kind of dream, it's let's make all of us a conscious decision today that wherever we are on the food supply chain, that food safety standards become a way of business, as it is the ethical way to do business. It's the right thing to do. And you can be a big company or a small company, you need to think about what you're doing and the consequences of what you're doing.
Absolutely. Absolutely. Wonderful. Mark, I really appreciate that. It's actually, it's interesting. I hear, most of the people around me say that, that the market needs to come up with the solutions for things like this. But, I think that when it comes to food safety and security, I think you're right. I think legislation, enforcement of that regulation, I think that's really where we're going to have to see this kind of progress to get, food safety where it really needs to be. So I really appreciate that. Sal, Mark, thanks for coming. It's always
Thanks
a
a lot.
pleasure when we get to do
always
this.
a pleasure.
Absolutely,
Right.
absolutely. And Bureau Veritas is just such a fascinating organization, and everything that you guys do is, again, just wonderful, huge impact, especially in places like Africa. So love having you guys on. And we'll, of course, do this again very soon. So
See you soon. With
Thank
pleasure.
you. Thank you, Jason.
Awesome.
Thanks, Jason.
Thank you.
Chance.
Ciao.
thank you, Mark.
Thanks,
Thank you,
guys. Thank
Sal.
you, Vidya.
Thank
Bye-bye.
Thanks,
you.
everyone.
Bye.